What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel and welcome back to the video. Today I'll be talking about 10 sponsors that should return to NASCAR. All 10 of these sponsors had a massive impact in the history of the sport and had massive recognition for the sport overall. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. The first sponsor, in my opinion, that should return to NASCAR is the Home Depot. Home Depot was in the sport for many years from around 1999 up until 2014, sponsoring the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. A majority of the time, of course, was with Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart was able to win 2 championships with that sponsor and also won many races with Matt Kenseth as well, and unfortunately left the sport around 2014. The Home Depot is a sponsor that I've wanted to see come back for a very, very long time. They've been one of my bigger sponsors that have been on my bucket list because one of the iconic orange brand. I remember that iconic orange brand, very simplistic, but an absolutely amazing paint scheme that Tony Stewart ran. Also, I think Joe Logano ran a really good paint scheme from 2009 up until the 2012 season when he left Joe Gibbs to go over and drive for Team Penske. I think the Home Depot would be one of those big hardware stores because right now when it comes to hardware, the biggest one of those right now is Menards, and Menards right now is the only major hardware brand that is around in the sport currently at the moment. Big chains, I should say. So I would really love to see the Home Depot make a return. It would be that massive market that I think NASCAR is looking for when it comes to hard work and hardware, and I really hope that the Home Depot does in fact decide to go ahead and make a return to the sport. I would love to see the Home Depot make a return to NASCAR. The second sponsor, in my opinion, that should return to NASCAR is Lowe's. Lowe's was in the sport for many years from basically the late 1990s when they sponsored Mike Skinner in the number 31 team and then Robbie Gordon in 2001. And they sponsored Jimmy Johnson from 2002 all the way to 2018. They're one of the most successful sponsors in NASCAR Cup Series history. They won 1 race with Robbie Gordon in 2001, and they also won 6 or 7 of Jimmy Johnson's Cup Series championships and were with Jimmy Johnson for a majority of his career. Unfortunately, after 2018, they left NASCAR. Very similar to the Home Depot, they would be another brand and sponsor that would be very recognizable if they were able to make a return. In addition to that as well, Lowe's kind of bridges that gap for the hardware side of things as well. An iconic 48 scheme that ran for a very, very long time. I would love to see Lowe's make a comeback to this sport. I think Lowe's, like I said, would bridge that gap, and I think Lowe's would be a really good sponsor for the sport overall. And I think that the ambassadors would do a really good job for the sport in branching out, because when Lowe's was around in NASCAR, NASCAR promoted this brand, and also Lowe's promoted the brand itself in NASCAR as well. So I really hope in the not-so-distant future, and hopefully not too far down the line and too far down the road, Lowe's can go ahead and make a return to the NASCAR Cup Series. I would absolutely love to see Lowe's make a return to NASCAR. The third sponsor that should return to NASCAR is Miller or Miller Lite. Miller was in NASCAR for many, many years from basically the late 1990s up until probably 2020, 2021. We all remember the iconic Blue Deuce scheme that Rusty Wallace ran for many years, won many races, and also, of course, Rusty got his final Cup Series victory in 2004 at Martinsville Speedway, driving the Blue Deuce car. And then Brad Keselowski, he drove the Blue Deuce car in 2012, winning the NASCAR Cup Series title, which of course was Team Penske's first NASCAR Cup Series championship. And they kind of switched the colors from blue all the way to white, and Brad Keselowski still was able to win a lot of races in the Miller Lite scheme. Unfortunately, Miller Lite kind of started backing off their branding, and they kind of switched over to Keystone Light. But when I think of big brands, Miller is one of the biggest alcohol companies in the world still to this day. And I think Miller coming back to the sport, I think that would bridge that alcohol gap. Because right now, when you look at the alcohol brands, right now you have Bud Light and Bud Busch that is sponsoring Ross Chastain this year. That's really about it, though, when it comes to alcohol brands. Granted, Budweiser did come back for a race or two, but they have only been around a little bit in racing because Budweiser kind of switched over to Busch Light. So I would absolutely love to see Miller make a return. It would be a massive brand to come back to the sport, and I think Miller Lite would bridge that major and massive gap that they're looking for when it comes to the alcoholic brands that they are absolutely looking for. The fourth sponsor, in my opinion, that should return to NASCAR is M&M's. M&M's or Mars was in NASCAR for a very, very long time. They joined in the mid to late 1990s when they sponsored the number 36 car for MB2 Motorsports. Then they switched over to Yates Racing around 2002 to 2003, and they were there with Elliott Sadler for many, many years. And then in 2008, they began to sponsor Kyle Busch when Kyle Busch switched over to Joe Gibbs Racing. And everybody knows about the Candyman, and Kyle Busch brought that Candyman sponsorship and branding to NASCAR for a very, very long time with iconic branding and iconic sponsorship. I believe if M&M's was able to make a comeback to the sport, I think it would absolutely be incredible. And it would be that big candy brand that NASCAR is looking for younger generations of fans. Because now you don't really have that younger connection anymore when M&M's and Mars Bros left the sport in 2022. I absolutely would love to see the M&M's branding come back to the sport in the not-so-distant future because I think it'd be very successful, and I think a lot of people would love to see it come back. I think it's going to be tough to bring them back, though, because they've left the sport, but I think most fans, like myself, would absolutely love to see the M&M's iconic brand make a return to NASCAR. Hopefully, in the not-so-distant future, it can make a return to the sport because I think it would be absolutely iconic and incredible brand in the sport. The fifth sponsor that should return to NASCAR is Burger King. Burger King sponsored Tony Stewart and also sponsored, I think, AJ Foyt Racing back in the day, but they're most notably known for sponsoring Tony Stewart when Tony Stewart joined Stewart-Haas Racing back in 2009, a sponsor from around 2009 up until the end of 2011. That Burger King sponsorship was really phenomenal, and you had activation because Tony Stewart got involved in a lot of their ads and a lot of their commercials. He kind of worked on the line. It was really fun ads to watch. And also, Burger King cars always look great to see on the racetrack as well. You had the iconic blue, you had the iconic white, everything around the Burger King icon would be there. And also, it would be able to compete against some of the other big fast food chains that currently are in the sport, like McDonald's, which came back to the sport very, very recently in a big way, sponsoring Bubba Wallace and also sponsoring Ross Chastain in races when he drove for Chip Ganassi Racing, and also Kyle Larson as well when he drove for Chip Ganassi Racing. I think Burger King coming back to the sport would, like I said, bridge that major gap that NASCAR is overall looking for, and I would love to see him make a return to the sport, so I think it bridged that gap of bringing iconic brands back to the sport of NASCAR Cup Series racing. The sixth sponsor that should return to NASCAR is Target. Target was in NASCAR for a very, very long time, from 2001 up until the end of 2016 or 2017. Unfortunately, they left motorsports altogether around 2017 when they left Chip Ganassi Racing. Like I mentioned, they're most notably known for working with Chip Ganassi Racing, not just in NASCAR, but in IndyCar as well. They were sponsoring drivers like Casey Mears, Jimmy Spencer. They also did, of course, work with Kyle Larson, and other drivers are part of that iconic brand. And Target, like I mentioned, was a very iconic brand and one of the biggest retail chains in the sport till this day, and biggest retail chains in the United States. I would love to see Target make a return because Target would be an iconic brand. And again, you see the Target, you got to see some really iconic schemes. You got to see really awesome schemes for Kyle Larson near the end of his time at Chip Ganassi Racing. And also got to see some really good looking schemes for Casey Mears. Also got to see some really good looking schemes for other drivers like Juan Pablo Montoya back in 2009 when he drove it. It would be a very iconic brand. It would be very, very recognizable. And I think that Target, if they had the chance to come back again, I think they would put a lot of money into it. So I would love to see Target make a return, and hopefully Target does decide to go ahead and say, hey, let's make a return to NASCAR and let's make a return to motorsports overall in general. The seventh brand that should return to NASCAR is Pepsi, or PepsiCo. Pepsi was in NASCAR for many, many years, working with drivers like Jeff Gordon, and also was working with Chase Elliott near the end of their time. Unfortunately, Pepsi left the sport about 3 or 4 years ago, which kind of hurt the Coke and battle wars between Pepsi and Coke, kind of confirming that Coke was the better product, at least at the time. But Pepsi dropped a lot of their work with them. I think Doritos had left at the time as well, and Mountain Dew, which had also been there, even though they've made a one-off or two return with Call It Racing recently. They were a former brand as well that worked with Chase Elliott through the first half of his career in the Cup Series up to this point. I would love to see Pepsi come back. Pepsi's an iconic brand, one of the most iconic brands. We all remember the 2001 Daytona race where they had Britney Spears working with Jeff Gordon, and Jeff Gordon also had Pepsi on his car for many races throughout his career, probably up until the end of his NASCAR Cup Series career. So I would love to see Pepsi come back, bring that iconic brand back, and would have the soda wars once again. Yes, we do have Dr. Pepper and Coke, but I would absolutely think Pepsi coming back, you could have a three-way war for proving who is the best. And you saw what Pepsi did, the activation did, especially during the 2004 Pepsi 400, where they had Jeff Gordon drinking a Pepsi and going up against all the Coke drivers. I think you would see a lot more activation with the Coke drivers as well if you had Pepsi coming in and being a rival sponsor to work with them. So I really hope Pepsi does make a return, because I want to see the rivalry for products again on the racetrack, especially for soda and beverage products. The A sponsor that should return to NASCAR is UPS. Everyone knows the iconic UPS brand. Sponsored Dale Jarrett from 2001 up until around 2008. We all know the notable We Ride the Truck and the Brown scheme, and also they sponsored David Reagan as well from 2009 up until 2011. Also did work with Carl Edwards a little bit during that time as well. The most notable drivers were Dale Jarrett and David Reagan. Dale Jarrett won many races in that iconic number 88 brand. Won some races in 2001, was one of the biggest championship threats and contenders with the UPS schemes. And also, of course, like I said, sponsored David Reagan, which David Reagan got his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory with the UPS brand. I think UPS coming back to the sport would basically be something that would be huge for the sport right now, because you don't have a lot of big of those postal service companies that are in NASCAR currently at the moment. I think if they were able to make a return and make a comeback, you would be able to, like I said, bridge that gap of bringing that iconic brand back. So I really hope UPS does decide to say, hey, let's make a return to the sport and let's bring the iconic branding back. I hope UPS does decide to go ahead and make a return, as I think it would be a huge return on investment. They haven't been in sports since around 2011 or 2012. I would love to see them make a return to the sport. The ninth sponsor that should return to NASCAR is Office Depot. Office Depot was in NASCAR for a very, very short amount of time, only from around 2005 up until the end of 2012. They sponsored two drivers, Carl Edwards and Tony Stewart, who of course are my two favorite drivers in NASCAR history. Tony Stewart was sponsored by them from 2009 up until 2012 when they left Stewart-Haas Racing at the end of the 2012 season. And they also sponsored Carl Edwards from 2005 up until the end of 2008. And Carl Edwards won a lot of races with Office Depot, got one with that sponsor in 2005, and a lot of his wins that came out in 2008 were with Office Depot on there. And Carl Edwards got involved with Office Depot in many commercials as well. They are one of the biggest office chains out there for school supplies, among other things, and they'd be able to bridge that gap of bringing the school supplies back in stock. I would love to see Office Depot make a return to the sport. I think they would do a phenomenal job promoting the brand and promoting everything around it, and I hope that Office Depot can, because like I said, I want to see Office Depot come back. It's been a long time since that brand was in the sport, and I think that you would see whatever team would work with them, I think that they would promote the hell out of it. So I really hope Office Depot does, in fact, make a return to NASCAR in the not-so-distant future. And the 10th final sponsor that I think should return to NASCAR is Aflac. Aflac, iconic for working with Carl Edwards for a majority of his career when he was at Roush. They unfortunately left Aflac, though, around the 2014 to 2015 season when, of course, Carl Edwards left Roush to go over to Joe Gibbs Racing starting in 2015. Everyone knows the iconic Aflac duck, and NASCAR would also integrate it, and NBC would also integrate it into their questionnaires and also basically into their broadcast. In 2005, they had the questionnaires, and basically you saw Benny Parsons say, cue the duck. So Aflac was doing a return on investment and also was putting a lot of effort into trying there. There was activation around Aflac. Like many sponsors I mentioned, there was a lot of activation for the sport overall. So I really love to see Aflac make a comeback and make a return, as I think it would be a massive and a huge iconic brand for the sport in general. So I hope Aflac does make a return, as I think that you see a lot of promotion for the sport overall. So those are 10 sponsors, in my opinion, that should return to NASCAR. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What sponsors would you love to see return to NASCAR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, there'll be a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel, talk about the news over the course of the last couple days. Then tomorrow on the channel, there should be some other special content dropping. There might be the Truck Series winner predictions. There also should be a heat race review dropping on the channel. The weather can hold off, and I'm not sure what's going on Sunday because the weather is not looking really great right now. I got a lot of great content dropping in the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.